So we want to be effective. So the strategies are crucial for fostering improved learning. If you don't have effective assessment and feedback, then the students' learning will definitely be problematic. So it's very important that we see how we can effectively exercise and apply the assessment and feedback in our teaching. Assessment should be designed to measure students' understanding. So you need to design certain quiz and to make sure that your students understand what you teach. Now, if they don't understand, then no point to teach at all. And so you need to make sure that the assessment is very measurable, and so that you will get the data and to understand what they really get, okay? And the measure students' understanding and skills actually. Now those two are very important and constantly used in the education process, and so that the students will be able to, you can use the formative approach and to observe the students growing and understanding, in the time continue. But summative is that after a period of time of learning, then you give this summative test or assessment, then you know that whether they have conclude all the data and understanding the whole semester or whole quarter. And so this summative is more in the long term, and then the formative is more in every day, even weekly, daily, weekly process. Okay, now quickly. Formative assessments such as quiz, and we like quizzes. Sometimes the students, particularly college students, they will write the last semester, the semester's report, and the teacher will give an course evaluation to all the students. And most of the students in our university will say, too many quizzes. Well, don't listen to them, okay? Just neglect. And because when the evaluation form come to the administrative office, we definitely want to know what they think, but we're not going to change what we think is good, okay? Now, definitely the students are going to complain. There's a lot of quizzes, there's a lot of tests, but that's the important way for us to know whether they got the information or not. Now, the less quiz, the less information for teachers. So quizzes is not just being test their grades, not necessary. But more importantly, the quiz and those kind of a formative assessment is to understand for the teachers how much they actually learn. Now, if they didn't learn much, then that means you need to reteach the part that you just taught. Okay? A lot of time in math, students just don't understand. It's over their head. And then you give the test. If you have 10 students, all of them fail. Well, listen, teachers, that means they don't understand. Don't force yourself, continue and reteach the concept again. And so they will be able to understand, okay? So the purpose is not to try to show off that I'm the teacher. They don't understand at all. No, that's not the case. Your job is to help your students to understand and to collect the information and be able to master the information and data you just share with them. And so it's important for the teacher to understand Okay, the quiz. I mean, sometimes I have 10 or maybe 15 quizzes every week. So in college we have a 15 weeks, so we have a 15 quizzes, and but not necessarily I will calculate all those 15 quizzes into their final grade. So I always tell them that if you miss 1 or 2, 3, it's fine. I'm going to select the best 10 in those 15. And then this will encourage the students to learn. So the purpose for quizzes is to help them to learn. It's not to defeat them, okay? So you are not the enemy of your student. You are the coach and the friends of your students trying to help them to learn. So quizzes and in-class activities. There's a certain kind of in-class activity that will also measure whether they learn. Like elementary, you have the competition and the boys and girls, and then you try to ask the questions, and the kids are going to trying to answer. Then you soon you will understand. Some of the students always answer correctly. Some they are very enthusiastic, but every time they say the wrong answer. I mean, that means that students you need to work more. Okay, in-class activities. Provide the immediate insight, and that is also important. Sometimes we have quiz, and then immediately we ask them to change the paper, and so they can grade. And once they grade, then immediately they know, wow, I missed this point, I missed that point, and that will help them in the big test that they are going to pass. Okay, so that's the formative assessment. So allowing for timely intervention and support. So you actually allow them if you immediately help them to get the insight or get some feedback, immediately they're going to understand, and because the timing is very important. A lot of teachers accumulate quiz, never grade. Until the last minutes, and all the quizzes and all the tests, and then guess what happened? It doesn't help the students to learn. So teachers, you need to be very diligent, and don't accumulate your tests and quizzes until the last minute. I have teachers, and coming over to teach one of the class, and then he accumulate all the quizzes and the tests and papers, and then last minute when he go on to the airport, and he handed me a whole file. I said, what is this? All the tests and papers and quizzes from the students. I said, well, how about your final grade? Well, I'll send it to you in the States. Well, obviously the students didn't know whether they improve or not. Okay, so that is really no for teachers. Teachers, be diligent. Once you give the quizzes, think of a way to immediately come out with a grade. If you want to grade yourself, that's fine, but no later. Within 48 hours. I gave myself 48 hours, and you need to come out with the results so students can learn. Otherwise, it prolongs. We are all busy. If you prolong, and then you don't have time, then you prolong more, and you don't have time to grade, and then later on, then you're going to be like the teachers I just mentioned, and pile up all the quizzes and tests and paper, and they're not even grade. So it is very important that then they will have timely intervention and timely support from you, and so you'll be able to help them to know, okay, John, this part you don't really familiar, study more. That you can help them. Otherwise, how did you know that the students, what is the students lacking and what is the students' problem? And so it's very important, catch up. And yes, I know very difficult, but yet very necessary. Summative assessments like final exam and projects evaluate overall proficiency. So that's really the final exam that you're going to assess whether they have learned overall this particular subject, and so we can assess that they have grasped all the concept and data. So that's a summative assessment. So two of the approach, both are important, and we are the school. There probably few schools that we still emphasize the formative and the summative assessment, and so we want the students to learn. However, the danger is that we follow formative assessment and summative assessment, but then we never put efforts to give them the timely support and intervention. That means you did not really help them at that point that they need help. Now, if they don't get help on that particular point, they don't understand. And showing in the assessment, they don't understand. But you didn't grade the paper, you continue, then guess what? They will never understand after they finish the class. So teachers, you are the key. Without put all the efforts and invest your life into the students, and can I say this? Students has no hope at all. I mean, because you are the one who actually bring the knowledge to them. So the assessment is very, very important. But yet the timely is the key word, and to provide the improvement of learning. Feedback shall be constructive and specific and timely, guiding students toward their learning goals. So all those words are very important. So when you send the feedback, should be constructive. So you share with the students, said, John, you did not learn this well. So we need to, see whether there's any other ways that you can learn. Let me come up with a plan so you can study a little bit more, and so you can remember. Something like that. You cannot say, John, you got an F. Look at you, stupid. Well, hey, you actually heard the student. And listen, we have a teachers, sometimes this is probably much easier. And then just score the students and say, if you don't do well next time, you're going to be spanked or whatever. But then some of the students maybe will be threatened, and then they were really afraid, and then they study. But some really going to have this discuss to study, and so we don't want that. We want to constructively to help our students to love to learn. So that's important. Specific means that okay, you did well on this part, but this part you really need to study harder. And I'm going to give you a more practical example when we come to the conclusion. Specific, and then just say, okay, you just need to focus on this part, and that's important. And again, timely, I mentioned that is important. Teachers, don't be lazy, because if you don't support them and intervene with them and guide them and lead them in the timely manner, once that time passes, then the students will have this psychological problem and resist to understand. And even though that part may not actually hinder the whole understanding, but because they don't understand that part, and they will have this kind of a mental resistance and said, oh, I'm not good in math. Well, actually, that's not necessarily true. It's just only that part they don't understand, but not all the math they don't understand. But when they have this trouble in this one part they didn't get over, then they will reject the whole subject. I don't like history. Why? Because I don't understand. I get a bad grade. Well, teachers, you need to know how to help them. Now, if they get a bad grade and then say, okay, now I like you to study that part again, and then I'll give you retake. Now, then the student come back and retake. You don't necessarily give them 98 if the second time they get 98, but you can combine the first and second and average. That's still fair. But give the students another chance to study a little bit more and understand more, and so that they are not going to be afraid of that particular subject. So that's the purpose. Our purpose is not to let the student feel, well, my teachers know better than me. No, we want our students to learn more, so that one day they know more than us. Okay, that's the key for a teacher. By combining this strategy, educator can create a dynamic learning environments that promotes continual improvements and deeper comprehension. So that's our purpose. Our goal is actually to help them to have this deeper comprehension. They understand. So all the assessment and feedback is to come to this goal that they understand the subject and they love the subject, and they learn a great deal of this particular subject. So that's the important that we need to create. So quickly, the definition of assessment. Assessments refers to the systematic process of collecting, reviewing, and using information to evaluate student learning, performance, or educational needs. Now that's assessment. That is a systematic process. And when we use quiz, in-class activity, and then later on the final exam, the purpose is of collecting the information of students' learning. So that is not actually trying to compete with each other, actually, even though the grades may show who is better, who is not. But we as a Christian need to understand, you don't want to teach students to compete with each other. You want to teach your students to compete with themselves, okay? And so that usually good teachers will give them a pre-exam. Before they learn anything, give them an exam. Then after the learning, give them another exam. And compare with the two exams. Then you know, before the teaching, what is the measurement. After the teaching, then what is the measurement. If after teaching, their grade is lower than previous, that means your teaching needs to improve, okay? Now, if after the teaching, their grade is improved tremendously, then that means your method is correct, and the students collect the good information. So that's something that we need to assess. So we are collecting information and to know what the students actually learn, and that's the assessment. It involves various methods and tools to measure students' knowledge, skill, attitude, and beliefs. So there's different ways. Most of the common things like task, quiz, in school, in-class activities, and even the survey form, and certain kind of questions, answer, those things can be used. And when you use assessment, there's a different ways that you can design, like choose and fold, and multiple choice, short essay, or paper, or project. Those are the assessment tools and methods that you can use. Assessments can be formative, providing ongoing feedback to improve learning, or summative, evaluating students' achievement at the end of an instructional period. Now, that's what we mentioned, formative, ongoing, every week or every day. Then the summative achievement assessment is at the end of the semester or quarterly. So that's assessment. The goal is to understand and improve educational outcomes. So the goal is to make sure, as a teacher, I know each of my students, how did they learn. Yes, some of the students, they have a good foundation. When they come to your class, they already are pretty good. So they don't need you to teach them how to study. They know how to study, and so definitely their grade is typical higher. But you don't satisfy with their high grade. You need to understand when they come in, what kind of level they are, and when they are ending, what kind of level they are. If they actually lower than what they coming, it doesn't mean that you teach well. It means that you need to examine what kind of a teaching that you have, and to help those even good students academically to improve. Because they may be maintained in the A average, but they actually lower their numbers, then that means either they did not put more efforts in, or your teaching have some fault that you need to improve. So that's the data we need to get. Now, for those students coming very low and F, and to then get a D, that means they improve. So you compare with this way, not to consider, well, you got D, I mean, you're bad, you didn't learn. No, not because of that, because sometimes they come in already have different levels. And particularly in our school, a lot of ESL students, I mean, they come in, they don't understand anything, but then when they finish, they actually get a passing grade. Well, that's the reason why we give them principal award. Okay, the principal award doesn't mean that they are good academically. Principal award means that they improve a lot. And so we have students come in, fail, and then finally, in the end, they got a principal award. Well, the parents were so, happy. How can my child get a award? Well, that's principal award. It doesn't mean that's an academic award. It means that they improve a lot. But that's what we want to encourage students. And so you need to understand that the goal is to help the students. And those students, ESL students, they think that they will never ever have any award, but then they get an improvement award. What do you think that it will help them? Well, get them more enthusiastic to study. And that's the reason why we have seen a lot of ESL students improve a lot, all because there's a certain kind of encouragement. So teachers, your encouragement, very important. And we believe encouragement is better than punishment. Of course, I mean, punishment is necessary, but more encouragement will definitely change your child's life. Quickly, this is the last slides I have, then we will have Romy to come and to teach us how to push the thumb up for our hotel. Okay, now feedback is information provided to individual or groups about their performance or behavior to guide future improvement. Now, feedback is similar to assessment, but it's information provided to the individual, or for example, John, or the group, or they have a small group, and so to show them how did you do in this particular project, and how do you behave, and then we'll guide them future improvement. I have a teacher. He told the students the first day, he said, now, you as a group, that you need to work together. If anyone do not behave, then you all need to be responsible. So he said, every class I come in and everybody performs well, I give you a smile face. So there's a chart there. Now, if you accumulate 10 smile face, then you're going to have free time, one class. But if you have one student did not behave well, no smiling face. Well, guess what? His class, he doesn't need a discipline at all, because everybody is disciplining everybody. And somebody is talking, and then the other students say, no talking, come on, we're going to have a smiling face. If you talk, no smiling face, and we're not going to have a reward. And so you can say, okay, now if you accumulate 30 smiling face, then you're going to have a pizza party. And those kind of encouragement, those kind of reward will encourage everybody to work together. And that's one of the ways that you can help them to improve their behavior. So this is the behavioral controlling, classroom management, and it's very effective, because if you are the only one to control their behavior, you're going to have a miserable semester. You'll have a very nice class, just like an angel, because they're going to help you to do the discipline. So it's very important you do that. It can be positive, reinforcing desirable behavior, just like I said. Well, everybody is going to, behave yourself. You got a smiling face. Well, 10, you get a free time, and 30, you got a pizza party. Well, not necessarily the teacher paid the money, but everybody pays $3, and you get a pizza party, and something like that. So the reinforcing desirable behavior or performance or constructive, offering insight on how to enhance and correct performance. So certain kind of data you can collect, and then in order to correct the wrong behavior. And with this kind of group, you can also ask them to say, well, John is not behaved today, so you don't have a smiling face. And then everybody is going to talk to John, said, you got to behave yourself, otherwise we all suffer. So that's the way that you can correct the wrong behavior. Then effective feedback is specific, timely, relevant, and actionable, helping recipients understand what they are doing well and what area need improvement. So effective feedback that we get the feedback from the students, from the peers, from the other teachers, and when we get all those data, then we can help this whole group and individual students or the group students to improve. Again, the understanding where to improve is really our goal, okay, as a teacher. A story talking about factory, the old machine didn't work. So they invited an old master to come to check whether it's an old machine. Then the master come and check whether the whole machine is old and really aged. So he checked with all the different areas and then take out a hammer and smash on one particular place. All of a sudden, the machine starts working. So the boss says, okay, how much I owe you? And he told the boss, says, $10,000. And the boss was shocked. $10,000? I mean, you didn't do anything. You just use your hammer and, smite some place, and you want me $10,000. I need a detailed invoice. Or the master says, sure, I'll send it to you. So next day, he received an invoice. First, smacked with a hammer, $1. But know where to smite, 9,999. Teachers, you need to know where to smite. And so you get the data and you know how to help the students to improve. So where to improve is very important. Okay, well, let's ask Romy to come to help us to know how to give your thumbs up, where to give us a thumbs up, so we can improve our hotel. Please come.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Doc.
Yes, go ahead. I'll change this one. Go ahead. Go ahead.
So I promise I'll make this short and simple. By the way, for those of you that don't know me well, I'm Romy. I have a 34 years background in the IT industry, 18 years in hotel management. So before I used to work and manage Canoa, Crown, Century Hotel, Rota, Valentino, and Crown Fiesta at Guam. So I'm here to also assist Dr. Wei now in their TFC side hotel that they acquired last year. So what is our goal? When you buy an old hotel or closed hotel, you inherit all those negative feedbacks from the previous customer. So for us to push down the 5 years old and bad reviews, we would like to encourage you here, brothers and sisters, to log in on your browser, whatever browser you have, or it could be on your mobile phone. Log in, make sure you have your account is logged in, and then proceed to look for the TFC side on your search engine. Can you do that now? If you have your devices? And you don't have internet? Okay. Please connect to TFC side hotel Wi-Fi.
Okay, so
TFC side hotel Wi-Fi.
TFT hotel Wi-Fi, okay.
TFC side hotel Wi-Fi, not TFC side, TFC side hotel Wi-Fi, the complete one.
Okay, that's password.
Yes, the password is 8 times 8, 8, 8, 8, 8, 8, 8.
Okay, 8.
Yeah, 8 times you input the number 8.
That's
And
all
it will,
number?
yeah,
Oh, 8.
it will direct you to a portal.
That's Cantonese. Be rich.
Oh, okay, Dr. Ray.
Okay.
Is
Yeah.
everyone connected?
Still working, still a little slow.
Yes.
Oh, yeah. I'm on. Okay. Now we go to the hotel now. They ask for password.
Yeah, 888 Dr.
Again?
Yes. I think. Yeah, So right there, right into portal.
Okay.
Yes. So on your browser, whatever browser you're using, it could be Chrome, it could be Samsung Internet Browser, or it could be Safari on Mac. Try to search TFC Side Hotel Saipan. Try this one.
TFC sign.
TFC Side Hotel Saipan.
Does it have .com?
No. Just on the browser itself. TFC Side Hotel. This one.
Posted a review 6 years ago.
This one?
Oh, no. You will see a picture of the hotel,
Yeah.
and then you will see
Reviews.
reviews. This one. Now this one? That you're on the booking.com.
Yes.
That's wrong. There.
That's some reviews. 5 stars.
Is the TV still only in Chinese?
Chinese.
The reviews. So the TV is only available in Chinese.
Yes. Have you seen that?
Yeah. Is it still only in Chinese?
So, you will see a right reviews.
Are they putting it there? Are they the reviews? Reviews.
Doc, did you find it?
Which website? Because I mean, there's
No,
like
it's not a website. You will be on the browser itself.
Oh, you're talking about Google reviews?
Yeah, Google browsers,
Okay.
yeah.
So not like Agoda
Yes.
or Booking or TripAdvisor?
No,
Okay.
that's a booking
It's
engine.
like Google Maps.
Right.
Are you connected, Doc?
Yeah. But how can I close the page?
So many reviews already. Wait. More reviews. The pressure.
Yes, yes, I think that's it. Okay. Make sure when you see the reviews, right, you can write reviews.
Where?
Opening in Facebook.
No, not the Facebook. You have to be on the Google or Chrome search engine. You will see the building of the TFC site hotel.
Yes, but when I click the website, it's going to Facebook.
So, yes.
So what should I write?
That was long ago.
Oh, you haven't signed in, that's why. For other devices that haven't signed in their official email account, it will not display on your devices. Write a review. That's the reason why it's not showing the word write a review, because you're not signed in on your email account or any official account that you have.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, browser should be signed in.
Yeah, browser should be signed in because your name will not be displayed on the reviews. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. For those who have signed in, you can start writing a simple reviews about the facility, about the location. For those who have seen the rooms, you can say that this room is more bigger than other hotel, blah blah blah.
By faith, we have seen and giving 5 stars.
Yeah.
The old,
I forgot.
we always go to the old one, the townful one.
No, not this one. Yeah, Miss Krista is on the Facebook. She's not on the search engine.
By faith in the spirit, we like.
Common
Ma'am,
people.
because you're not signed in. You need to sign in.
Can you search it again? Sorry. Because it just sounded.
Oh, now you're signed in, right? So look for the building and then go to reviews.
Get rid of the townful.
Brother only.
But she had
There.
that.
Since you already
Yeah.
look for the write a review. Wait,
What's
Images.
in that?
This one. There. Write a review.
How can you remove the bad reviews?
You cannot remove the. I've tried to contact Google Business. It says we are not the original owner, so that's why it will stay there for 5 years. So now what we're doing is we're pushing it down by writing a new reviews, good reviews, because we already informed them that we are the new management and everything is it's being fixed. Whatever the bad reviews from the 5 years ago.
And that leads to another question. So on Google Maps, there's like pictures of the campus from like 5 years ago and all that. Those old pictures.
Whoever is handling the Google business for Eucon,
Can do
Yeah.
that from an actual.
whoever is the administrator before, whoever established the Google, the Eucon domain.
Right.
Dr. Ray, do you still know who's the owner of the Eucon domain? Previously, whoever managed that?
Dr. Software.
Oh, so he could delete old
Yeah,
pictures.
because if you're not the administrator, you will not be able to remove or to update any pictures. It took me like almost 4 months to communicate with Google because they're asking for proof of sales or proof of ownership, tax. Yeah. And please don't forget to share our property in your social media.
Mag-review na ako. Sign pin na ako.
View or reviews.
Mag-review na ako. Hindi ko naman ako nakacheck.
Oh, I'm not on there.
I go into the book.
You're going to book me again. Did you sign in, Doc? The
I guess.
EFC side.
Is that okay? Good. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Yan sa akin, oo.
Okay, let's have 2 minutes to get your dessert, snack, and water, tea, and coffee. We are ready. And then we'll come back and then we'll have our assessment. 你需要小心，不要把这个。
OK， 好，
你如果
就会掉下去吗？
呀，因为这很窄，这边。
我需要放这个。
OK。哦，你放这个。
对。
你要不要我拿一个？
我可以拿另外一个吗？
好。来，你桌子。
掉了。我需要什么时候停？
来呀。
this is an assessment feedback strategy for improved learning. So let's pray. Father, we are so grateful for this time that we can come together. Thank you for a wonderful time that Thou has prepared for us. Thank you for the room. Thank you for Thy mercy and grace. Thank you for all the provisions and protection. Now be with us as we continue to learn and to help each other as a teamwork and to serve Thee and glorify Thy name. We pray all this in Jesus' name. Amen. Okay, Dr. Smith.
All right, so today we're going to be talking about assessments, but specifically on creating assessments and how we can make them as objective as possible. So when we're talking about assessments, there are a variety of assessments. And when you grade, your total grade should not come from just one type of assessment. So if you are familiar with our curriculum that we use several different types of assessments. It's not just all tests, not just all quizzes, not just all projects. We have a variety of them. So if you're familiar with our curriculum, this is why it's so important to have a good curriculum, so you don't have to figure out all of these things on your own. We use different types of assessments, and then specifically tailored to our college and then our graduates, we use different levels of assessments. So we do have quizzes, we do have tests, we ask students to do summaries, we make sure that they have papers and projects that are due, sometimes even presentations in the classes, so that it is an overall type of assessment and it's not just one thing that you're basing your entire grade off of. I also want to mention that not every single type of assessment is, sorry, this kind of just went on by itself. Not every single type of assessment is suitable for every single level. So for example, there are certain types of assessments that are suitable for graduate level classes or college level classes, but are not necessarily suitable for kindergarten or elementary. This is why I do appreciate that we have a curriculum, because the curriculum helps us kind of figure out what assessments are suitable for certain levels. Now today we're only going to be focusing on creating and making specifically quizzes and tests and how we can make them as objective as possible, because that's our goal. Now as humans, there's nothing that is 100%. So our tests are not necessarily going to be 100% objective, but we want to strive towards that and try to make sure that our tests do accurately measure what the students are supposed to know and not just necessarily what they do know. Because there's a certain amount of knowledge that they have to know, and does this test accurately reflect what they are supposed to know? So let's talk about different types of tests. There are two categories of test items. The first one is the objective items, and these items would require students to supply the answer. So they would select either the correct answer from several different kinds of answers, or you supply a short word or a short phrase to answer the question or to complete the statement. The next type would be the subjective or the essay type of item. So subjective or essay items permit the students to then organize the data in their heads and then to replicate that data onto the test in their own words, you could say, so an original answer. Objective items would then be one of these: multiple choice, true, false, matching, short answer, completion. These would be objective types of answers or items. And then subjective types, on the other hand, would be short answer essay, long answer essay, so the extended response essay. It could be problem solving, or also performance test items. So orally answer these questions, or give me a speech over this particular thing, or a book report, but make it oral, kind of like that. That would be more subjective or essay type. Let's do a short quiz to see how much you know about tests. I'll give you a question and then you can answer if you want, or if you choose to remain silent, that's fine. I will also give you the answer. The first question would then, so the answers could be true, false, or questionable. No one really knows. The first question is, essay exams are easier to construct than objective exams. Are these true or false? This is true for the most part. Essay items do tend to be easier, and only because they're less time consuming. Now, it could be difficult to create a very good essay question that actually measures what you're trying to test. Same, it could be, but it is less time consuming to construct these essay exams because objective test items do take a long time to create from scratch. If you've ever made a test from scratch before, you know. So technically this is correct, and the content appropriate multiple choice or true false require more time to write. Next question. Essay exams require more thorough student preparation and study time than objective items.
Questionable.
Questionable, this is right. It's not necessary. The research is not for one or the other. The research shows that actually student study time is about the same. Whether they're studying for an exam test or whether they're studying for objective tests, it's about the same. And the type of knowledge that they have to know is almost about the same too if you construct them objectively and correctly as they should be. So this one is questionable. The research isn't clear about this. Next question, essay exams require writing skills where objective exams do not.
True.
This is true. This is true, especially if you have taken, any of the standardized testing. So SAT, TOEFL, what's the other one? ACT. You'll know that if you're trying to answer essay exams, you do need some level of writing skills. So this one is true. So a lot of students who don't have writing skills would then be put at a disadvantage, depending on how you grade also. If you are grading for grammar, all of the punctuation, etc., you would have to obviously tell the students ahead of time so that they know that they can prepare for that also. But this is true. Essay exams definitely do require writing skills for students, and so those who do have them would be at an advantage to those who don't. Next question, essay exams teach a person how to write.
Question.
This is false. Essay exams do not. They do not teach you how to write. The teacher needs to teach the student how to write so that they can then answer the essay question. So if your students do not have that level of writing, for example, in kindergarten or lower elementary, it would not be wise to give essay exams to the students, obviously, for reasons that we can see. So constant use of essay tests could encourage the knowledgeable, but then the student who has poor writing skills may be then discouraged to improve because their writing skills are not there. Next one, essay exams are more subjective in nature than are objective exams.
Yeah, true.
I mean, the name itself, right? This is true, yes. Essays are more subjective in nature just because of teacher scoring. And really, that's the only reason why they are more subjective, because the teacher is human. And so if the teacher is grading this paragraph for many different students and he doesn't have a rubric or some kind of way that he's grading the essays, then yes, it could be subjective. So if you are giving essays on a test, I highly, highly, highly suggest you to, number one, already have an answer, a model answer that the students can kind of match up to. And then number two, do have a rubric. What things do you want them to answer? What are the items? And kind of also number it so that you can give it a point system. But yeah, sometimes some teachers will grade based on neatness or grammar or punctuation, and you do want to try to limit that to be more objective. Next question. Objective exams encourage guessing more so than essay exams.
Questionable.
Yes, questionable. Very good. This one is, the research isn't, not necessarily. Both types of items can actually encourage guessing to a certain degree. Obviously, multiple choice, true false matching, you have with true false 50-50. Which one is it? So yes, definitely there is blind guessing that can be involved. But essay items can also encourage guessing because of bluffing. Sometimes a student will try to write a lot just so that maybe they will hit the point in one of their sentences. And so it also tends to have that kind of result. So do be careful about that. Keep that in mind. Next one. Essay exams limit the extent of content covered.
No, false.
This one's actually true. Because there are only so many types of questions you can ask, or so many questions you can ask on an essay exam. At most, in the hour that's given them to take this test, maybe 10 essay questions. Whereas for objective questions, you can ask up to 100 questions if it's, mostly multiple choice or matching, etc. So really it's just the time constraints. Sure, if you had a 10-hour test, then yes, with an essay you could test as much information as you want. But we are limited by time, so unfortunately this is true. Essay exams do limit the type and the content that you can cover. Next question. Essay and objective exams can be used to measure the same content or ability.
Let's say questionable.
I can see where you're coming from, but actually this is true. Both items can measure similar content or learning objectives. It really depends on what your learning objective is. Research has shown that students respond almost identically to essay and objective test items that actually cover the same type of content. So the way that they respond to either one of those, if you're asking the same things, is the same. Next question. Essay and objective items or exams are both good ways to evaluate a student's level of knowledge.
True.
This is true. I think if the student level is able to take the essay type, because obviously kindergarten, elementary, you're not going to give them essay exams. But for high school, graduate level, college, this is true. Both objective and essay items are good devices for measuring student achievement. But as we can see in the previous questions, there are particular measurement situations where one type is necessarily more appropriate than the other. Let's talk about very quickly why we test. I think Dr. Wei covered most of this, but there are a couple reasons why we test, and some of them, if you're not thinking about it deeply, you're probably just thinking, oh, I need a grade. That's why we test. I need a grade. Yes, you do need a grade. We have to submit grades, but there's more to it. The first one I would say is that we want to motivate students and reinforce learning. A couple good reasons, of course. The first one is that well-constructed tests will motivate your students. It will encourage them to study more because they know, oh, this is what I know and this is what I don't know. So now that I've been tested over it, I'm more likely to remember the stuff that I didn't know before. And Dr. Ray also mentioned timely feedback. It is very important to grade your tests and quizzes and your projects as soon as you can. Now, we're all busy. We have multiple students, especially if you're teaching, any type of English class where you have to grade a lot of papers. Stuff happens, life happens, and things pile up. But I think Dr. Wei said 48 hours. Actually, our curriculum gives you, I think, 3 days. 3 days to grade tests before you should really have it back to the students. And then quizzes, I think most of the time we're grading them in class so they can have that feedback immediately. For papers, it takes longer, maybe a week, but do set aside time to grade a couple every single day. You don't have to sit down and grade all 30. Do space it out so that you can complete your grading by the deadline. The next one then is to assess student mastery of course objectives. If you construct tests well, you will be able to assess student mastery of your course objectives. Now, this all goes back to then setting and making sure you have accurate and good course objectives. Course objectives just mean at the end of this class or at the end of this subject or grade year, what do I want my students to be able to learn? You should have yearly course objectives, and then you should also have daily course objectives. At the end of this day, what do I want my students to be able to remember, to be able to learn, to be able to understand? And you should use those measurable terms when you're creating these student course objectives. And then finally, the purpose of testing is to provide teaching feedback, not just for the students in what they've learned, but for yourself. How have you taught? In every single class, there should be kind of like a curve for students. There are some students who will do very well. There are some students who will probably not do very well, but then most of your students should be average. And so when you teach in your class, you are teaching towards these average students. In this one class, where does that average fall then? You would teach towards those particular students. So once again, as you give these tests, if all of your students are failing a test, sorry, but there's probably something wrong with your teaching. So you should go back and evaluate your teaching. Now, if everyone is then passing, it's not necessarily a bad thing because we want all of our students to be doing very well. I guess you might have to also be aware then, is someone cheating? But we do want most of our students to be either doing very well or average. And so once again, giving these tests and these types of assessments would then give you feedback on your particular teaching. There are 7 things, or 8, I guess, that I want to mention for testing. The first one then is the length of the test. When you create a test from scratch, it takes time. For all of our college professors, we are creating our own tests. And so it does take a lot of our time. Even if you are using a test from a previous professor, you should still look over it, because the way that you teach the course and the emphasis that you put into it might be different from that previous professor. Which is why I think in high school, in our elementary, it's good that we have a curriculum, because then the curriculum will dictate what is important for you to be teaching. But in college, it's a little bit trickier, because every professor decides what is important in his class. So the first thing is then the length of the test. Now, in theory, the more items a test has, the more objective it is. But we only have 50 minutes to give the students this test, so it's not like you can create a 1,000-question test. There's a limit. So on a short test, obviously, if they answer a few questions incorrectly, they get a low score. If there are only 10 questions on the quiz, each question is worth 10 points. So they miss one, their grade is a 90. But on a 100-question test or quiz, if they miss one, their grade is a 99. So the difference is there. Obviously, the more questions you have, the more reliable it is, the not necessarily easier it is for the students, but you get the idea. So on a long test, the wrong answers will not influence the results as much. But a long test does have drawbacks. If your test is too long, you have to factor in student fatigue. They will be tired for answering all of those questions that you have there. So once again, that time limit, the 50 minutes there, is for a reason. So once again, if a test is lengthy, for example, a final exam or a midterm exam, you do want to vary the types of questions that you're asking. So not just all essay, not just all matching, not just all multiple choice, but a variety of them, so that you can factor in when students will get tired. The next one. Make sure you have clear, concise instructions. It is necessary to give clear, concise instructions. And it's useful sometimes even to provide an example of how you want them to answer a particular question, especially if it's a new type of question that hasn't been asked before. This will help students understand exactly what is necessary. So what seems to be clear to the writer may sometimes be unclear to the student. So it's good sometimes to be able to look at what other tests say and use those as your instructions also. If you've spent any time studying the ABECA tests, I think they do a good job giving the instructions and the types of questions and the variety of questions that they ask. So if you are ever in doubt and you have to create your own test, go look up an ABECA test to see what kind of instructions are given. You can kind of model yours after that one. The next one is to mix it up, kind of what I mentioned before. It's very advantageous to mix up the types of items. So multiple choice, true and false, maybe an essay in there, do some short answer, do some fill in the blank. When you're doing a written exam, you want to mix up those things. And sometimes even you may want to mix performance type exams with written types of exams. So in our elementary, especially in math, there are 2 portions. There's the written exam and then there's the oral exam. Same thing with reading. It really depends on the subject, whether you'll have an oral one and then a written one, but it is sometimes good to also throw those in there. Weaknesses connected with one kind of item or component or in students' test taking skills will then be minimized if you do that. Another one is to test early. And when I say this, it doesn't mean early in the day, but it can also be helpful. But what I mean is early in the semester. So don't wait until the end before you give the one final exam. You should be testing regularly. Now because we use a curriculum, we're forced kind of to do that. For our college professors and for our graduate professors, we decide when we want to test the students, but I think it's important that we do so regularly. So quizzes every so often, tests every so often, maybe throw in a midterm there, and then a final exam. It's easier for the students to do well when there are multiple assessments rather than if there's just one, especially if you are a new to them teacher. When you're a new teacher to them, they don't know the way you test. So it's important for you to test them regularly so they become accustomed to the way that you test. They know what questions you might ask, they know what to focus on, and then they get used to the style that you write the test in. Maybe the font that you use or the format that you use. And so once again, it's important to test early and regularly. So the next one, test frequently also. Frequent testing helps students to avoid getting behind, especially if there's a lot of material to cover. If there's a lot of material to cover, you want to make sure that you test them every so often so that they're not accumulating all the knowledge until the end. Everyone has been a student before. We all procrastinate. If there's no test coming up, we're not going to sit there and study, obviously. But when you do have a test that's there regularly, your students will then be encouraged to study at certain intervals. It's not just the entire semester's worth of material that they have to prepare for at the end for the final exam. So once again, it's important to make sure that you're testing frequently. The next one is to check for accuracy. We're all human. We make mistakes. I mean, I don't know if you've ever seen a mistake on an ABECA test. I have. They have a whole team to help them. But there are, once in a while, there is a mistake. So if there's a mistake, you do want to correct that. It's good to have maybe another teacher help you look over it, just to see if they understand the instructions, they know what you're asking, what the type of question you're asking, what the answer could be, and then also to see if there are any grammatical or formatting issues. So make sure that you check for accuracy. But then on the other hand also, even if you're using a curriculum that has all the tests there for you, do look over the questions and see what the test emphasizes. Now, I'm not asking you to teach the test. We're not teaching the test to the students. It could be seen as teaching the test to the students if you only have so many questions. But if you are asking them questions and covering a lot of the material, then it's not teaching the test. So when I ask you to look over the test first before you teach the lessons, I'm asking you to see what is important and what is focused on. For our college professors, even if you are getting a test from a previous professor, like I mentioned before, you do want to look over it and see what they emphasize. Their emphasis may not be your emphasis. And so once again, you may have to end up creating your own test so that it accurately reflects your teaching. Does that make sense? So once again, check for accuracy in both of those ways. The next one, proofread your exams. Like I said before, it's important to proofread them, look at them carefully, and when possible, have someone else maybe look over it to see if it has any mistakes. Tiny mistakes such as, misnumbering can throw off the entire test and cause problems later. So just check for those things, missing pages, etc. And then finally, when you're constructing tests, generally, whether it's a written or performance test, it is wise to avoid having several items depend on a previous item. I don't know if when you've taken tests before, if one question that you answer, there's a question that you answer, then the next question that you answer depends on the answer to this question. You see what I'm saying? It's wise not to have those. If you have those, then if the student doesn't know it, he gets both of them wrong. That makes sense? So you do try to make sure that it's individual. Now, sometimes in math especially, you might have to do that. Just because there are different things that you're trying to test. And so once again, it's really up to depends on the subject. But for, reading subjects, history, science, I would say try to avoid that. It's not necessary to do that. Make sure that every answer belongs to just one question and that you're not trying to test several questions that depend on the answer of the first one. So once again, we don't want to penalize the student for a repeated error. You already know he doesn't know this question. So what makes you think he's going to know this other one that depends on this one?
Or maybe giving a clue to the next one.
Yes, we'll get to that. Another one is that good tests will measure what you want it to measure, and then bad tests do not. If you're going to write a test and you want it to be a good test, a really simple judge of that is, does it measure what you taught? If it doesn't measure what you taught, it's a bad test, even if the answers on it are objective and great. It needs to measure what you taught in the class. Now, if you are not teaching the emphasis of the test, then maybe you should reevaluate how you emphasize things in your own class. This is why I want you to go over and look at all the questions if you're not making your own tests, later on after you teach. Go look over all the questions to see what the emphasis is so that when you are teaching the lesson, you know what you should be emphasizing. And then, of course, emphasize the parts of the course that are important. This is why I think it's good that we have a curriculum. The curriculum will tell you what is important. And it's not just, oh, I really like this subject, so I'm going to spend 3 months on this subject, and then I don't really like this subject, so I'm going to spend 1 day on this subject. No, it's divided and evenly arranged. But for our college professors, you kind of get to choose and decide what you think is important, like I said before. So make sure that what you think is important is actually important, and then make sure that you test those. It is really tempting to just emphasize the parts that were a part of your degree. Maybe you specialized in a certain area, so you know a lot about it and you're excited to teach it. But once again, everything has to be balanced. Make sure that you are following some kind of a plan to emphasize what is actually truly important that the students need to know. Now let's talk about when we should use essay or objective tests. Like I said before, it really depends on the age level. If your students are older, essay tests would be appropriate. If your students are younger, probably lean more towards objective tests. But when should I use an essay or an objective test? Let's talk about the essay test first. Essay tests are appropriate when, number one, you have a small group of students. And I say this simply because it takes a long time to grade essay tests. So if you have 50 students, I don't think you want to be grading so many essays, especially if it's a 10-question test. That's a lot of essays that you're going to have to be grading. So once again, if you have a small group, which in our case, most of the time we do have small groups, it would be fine to give an essay test. Another one is that the test is not necessarily going to be reused. And when I say this, it's because essay tests are more easily remembered than objective tests. The student's not going to memorize all 50 questions necessarily, but they will remember the essay that you give. So it is often wise to change out your essays if you're going to be repeating the same test. Another thing is that it encourages the development of student skill in writing. Now, like I said before, it won't teach the student how to write, but it will encourage him to learn how to. It really depends on you as a teacher. You need to teach your students how to answer these essay types of questions. There should still be all the parts that an essay should have. So, introduction, body, conclusion, it should have a thesis, it should have all the main points, etc. But you have to teach them how to do this. If you don't, they're not going to learn how to write. And then, of course, you are more interested in exploring the student's attitudes than in measuring his or her achievement. Then that would be a good time to use an essay test. When do we use objective tests, though? A couple things. Number one, to the flip side of the other one, when you have a large group. If you have a large group of students, it is wise to use objective tests simply because of the grading, once again. They are easier to grade, they are faster to grade, and then the tests can also be reused. Another one is that they are highly reliable for obtaining objective scores. And then, of course, they are impartial and they are most of the time fair because you aren't influenced by your own scoring biases and also preferences. So, which is why I always tell my teachers, if you're going to be grading papers and essays, try to do so when you yourself are in a good condition. So when you're awake, when you're not tired, that's the time that you should be grading those. Not when you're half falling asleep. That's not a good time to grade essays or papers. Choose a time when you are awake and you are energized to grade those so that you can be fair to each of your students. Let's talk about some general guidelines then. The first one is that, we mentioned this before, by definition, no test and no assessment is going to be 100%. It's not necessarily going to be 100% objective because we are fallible humans. That's just the way that it is. But there are things that we can put in place to help make the test more objective. And the first one is this one. So we want to make sure that we are assessing the achievement of instructional objectives, our goals. They should achieve your goals for the class. What do I want my students to learn by the end of this class? And that's what you test. Which then also brings us back to then you have to make sure that what you're testing is important and what you're teaching is important too. Number 2, we want to measure important aspects of the subject. So the concepts and all of the conceptual relations. Going back also to the first point that we mentioned before. Make sure that what you're teaching then is important content. And then number 3, you want to accurately reflect the emphasis that is placed on important aspects of the instruction. Once again, just general guidelines that I've mentioned before. Every single teacher is a little bit different. No one is exactly the same. The things that we emphasize will be a little bit different. So you want to make sure that you're testing the things that you thought were important. And then of course, you want to make sure that you measure appropriate level of student knowledge. Measure the appropriate level of student knowledge. We're going to mention it a little bit. But if you have studied assessments, questioning, education, you know about Bloom's taxonomy, the different levels of knowledge that there are, starting from the most basic to the higher types of levels. So are you testing the right level for your students? And then finally, you want to vary the questions in difficulty. Vary the questions in difficulty. Some of them will be rote memorization. Some of them will be fairly simple, but then some of them will require a little bit more comprehension and understanding. Your test should be an accurate reflection of that. So if you're making a test for the first time, like I said, I highly suggest that you go and review some of the Abeka tests. I think they do a great job of putting in a different mixture of difficulty levels and also types of questions there for that. Now let's talk about the quality of a test. There are 7 things that I want to mention for test quality. We'll go over each one of them. The first one is cognitive complexity. The next one is content quality, meaningfulness, language appropriateness, transfer and generalizability, fairness, and then reliability. So let's talk about the first one, cognitive complexity. What do I mean by cognitive complexity? This is the first criterion for establishing a test that is objective. What I'm saying here is that this test that you're creating, the questions will focus on appropriate intellectual activity ranging from simple recall to then higher levels of, for example, problem solving, critical thinking, and reasoning. Once again, going back to Bloom's taxonomy, we'll discuss this in a second. A good test will reflect your goals of instruction. And I've just repeated the same thing over and over again. If the instructor is mainly concerned about students memorizing facts, then your test should reflect that. If you're more concerned about students asking for recall questions, then that should be what your test reflects. But if you're trying to develop analytical skills or comprehension skills or understanding, then a test that only asks for recall would then not be appropriate, if that makes sense. So then a lot of times students will just think, well, you just want me to memorize a lot of things, which may be true, but then you should have emphasized that in your teaching. Let's talk about Bloom's taxonomy then. In 1948, there was an APA, American Psychological Association convention, and there were a group of psychologists that decided that it would be useful to classify the different types of learning or the levels of learning that a student can achieve in a certain type of course. So then in 1956, after a lot of research on these educational goals, the group finally published a book that was edited by Benjamin S. Bloom. And so this is what we know today as Bloom's taxonomy of educational objectives. And there are 6 levels that are involved here, starting from knowledge, then comprehension, application, analysis, synthesis, and evaluation. Now, I'm not saying that you need all 6 of these on every single test. Obviously not, because there are certain levels that certain students cannot achieve at that time. These levels of understanding will assist in knowing what types of questions then you should be asking. A lot of times teachers tend to ask a lot of questions in a certain category. Does anyone know? About 80 to 90% of teachers ask questions in one of these levels. Knowledge, that's right. Which, understandable, especially because we are traditionalists. Knowledge is important. It is the foundation. It is the basis. So you should be asking a lot of knowledge types of questions. But a lot of times, like I said, these questions are not bad, but if you're using them all the time and only using the knowledge level, it can create problems later on. You're not testing higher thinking, you're not testing critical skills, and you're not testing students to learn more and engage more. So we want to ask higher order questions because these questions require more brain power, obviously. Now, like I said before, in kindergarten and lower elementary, you might not use the evaluation level just because the students at that age don't necessarily need to know how to evaluate. They don't necessarily need to know, why a certain philosophy is against their Christian philosophy. They're still being taught what their Christian philosophy should be. So once again, it really depends on the level. But let's talk about the first level, the knowledge level. This knowledge level, or this level, is where you recognize and remember or recall information. So this is the most basic level. This is the one that you begin with when you start to learn. So this includes memorizing dates, memorizing events, places, people, things, terms, definitions, facts, principles, theories, methods, and procedures. This is what the knowledge level would look like. So then questions that you frame would be something like, who invented this? When did he invent this? Where did this event take place? Where is the, etc. And so this would be the knowledge level. This is a good level to begin with. This is what most students do begin with because they need that basic foundation of gaining knowledge. But then at a certain point, you should move beyond that then to the next one, which is the comprehension level. This level is then understanding the meaning of information, which then includes restating it in your own words. Can you say it again in your own words? Translating it from one form to another, maybe interpreting, maybe explaining, and then summarizing also. So then question frames would then be, can you restate this in your own words? Can you convert the fractions into decimals? Can you list 3 reasons for this particular thing? You're asking them not just to regurgitate information now, you're asking them to understand it at the next level and then give it back to you. And then at some point, they should be able to go on to the next level, which is application. This one would be applying rules, methods, or principles to a new situation. In math, this would kind of be like story problems. So you've learned this addition fact already. Now let me give you this problem and see if you can solve it in a different type of setting. So this would be something like classifying something as a specific example of either a general principle or using a formula to solve a certain type of problem. Sample questions would then be, how is this particular thing an example of this? How is this related to this particular thing? Or why is this particular thing so important? Why is it significant? And then the next one would be analysis. Analysis just means identifying an organization or a pattern within a specific type of system. So you know the parts, the relationships between the components, and you're able to organize it into some kind of form. Sample questions would then be, what are the parts of this particular thing? Can you classify according to this system? Can you outline or can you diagram? So in grammar, it would be the diagramming. You take the sentence, can you diagram it? Can you draw a picture of this? Can you put it together in a cohesive form? And then the next one would be synthesis. Synthesis is just combining ideas to form a new whole. You're discovering and creating new connections, generalizations, patterns, or perspectives. Obviously, students at a lower age would not be able to do something like this. But then sample question frames would be, what would you infer from this situation? What ideas can you add to this situation? And how would you create a new, etc.? Now, if you've noticed in a lot of the curriculum, even for our lower grades, they do ask questions in this way. For reading exercises, for the things that they're asking the students, there are times when these questions do come up. So it's good to ask these higher level questions. The last one then would be evaluation. This is using evidence and argument to judge a proposal. Using evidence and reasoned argument to judge how well a proposal would accomplish a certain thing, a purpose. Or this could be resolving controversies or differences of opinions. I think this would be a lot of times in the form of a paper. where you ask the students to come up with a thesis that they have to prove or disprove according to their reasons. And I believe in school, they begin writing research papers, at least the beginnings of one in the 4th grade, I think. So, sample question frames would then be, do you agree with this particular thing? How would you decide about a certain thing? What priority would you give to this certain thing? Now, as you can see from these questions, a lot of times these would not necessarily be asked to students who don't already have a foundation. You're not going to ask students if they agree to something if they don't know whether they should agree to it. And so you would teach them first whether or not they would before you ask questions like these. So this is the first one, cognitive complexity. Once again, just giving you a general overview of what types of questions you should be asking. Not just all knowledge level, you should be asking some higher level also. But the next one is content quality. The second criterion for writing a test is content quality. So this means that the test questions will permit students to demonstrate their knowledge of challenging and important subject matter. This is all based on the fact that you have already taught this important matter in your class. Some important questions that need to be answered concerning the content of the quality test would be, what are the test specifications? What skills do they indicate will be tested? How many questions and how many areas will you cover? How many sections will there be? And what format will you use to test? There are basically 2 types of fonts. I don't know if you've done any studying on this. There's serif and then there's sans serif. So if you look at all the types of fonts that are in Microsoft Word, they're basically categorized into 2 different types. There are the types that have the little edges on them, so they have like little small marks at the edge of each letter, and then there are some that don't. So for example, I think the default setting is Calibri. Calibri would not have those little marks on the side, whereas Times New Roman, which is the type that your teacher most likely wants you to write your paper in, Times New Roman, has those little edges. I think research has shown that if you are printing out a paper on a book or in hard copy form, it is good to use a type that will have those little edges. It aids in reading in a certain way. And then if you're looking at it on a screen, then it would be easier not to have those little edges on your letters. So once again, if you're printing out your test, use Times New Roman. Times New Roman is the standard, basically. So if you're focused on a certain type of content in your class, your emphasis should then be reflected on your test. But then if you're not focusing on one specific thing, you want to make sure that you're covering all of the things that are important. Like I said before, students will go by your implicit values, what you think is important, and not necessarily the ones that you say are important. If they think that you're going to test something, even though you didn't say that, they will study for that particular thing. So you want to make sure that you are fairly covering all of the content. Now, to achieve content quality, you have to plan your test. A lot of you, I know, aren't making your own tests, and you're relying on flounder even more painfully if they have to guess what to study. So the obvious solution to the problem is then to give students specific study questions. Now, obviously, a lot of people will criticize this as you're teaching the test. Yes, if your test bank is very small, that's okay. But if you have many, many, many study questions, you're not necessarily going. Now, in grade school, the textbook usually has highlighted portions. These are the terms that they want you to remember. So in our high school and also elementary, there are bolded terms. And there are highlighted, italics, things that you want to mention. But sometimes it's also good to tell the students, this section is important, I want you to remember this. This section is also important, I want you to remember this and memorize that. So once again, Dr. Wei mentioned this, it is important to teach your students how to study. Like I said before, they shouldn't have to guess what's on your mind. You should tell them what the important things are so that they can study and prepare for those. The next one, language appropriateness. And this just means that the language demands will be clear and appropriate to the assessment tasks and to the students. So your instructions and then the way that you phrase the questions will then be clear and appropriate. Now, the test questions should reflect the language that you use in your classroom, which then also means that the language you use in your classroom should then be formal and should be free of excess language. This means that you have to use the correct type of language in class also. But the terms that you use, the jargon that you use in your own class has to be reflected on the test, which means then that you have to look over the test if you're not creating it yourself ahead of time.
And I need to ask a question.
Yes.
That's the thing that threw me. The test turned out to be much hard, I would say, more difficult to understand what was wanted. And the students had no idea that that was what I wanted.
I think it's because you are using an Abeka test, then it is important that you look over the questions ahead of time so that when you are asking questions to the students in class, you use the same phrasing. If you use the same phrasing, it becomes easier for them to then be able to recognize that on a test. The only other thing would be to create your own test, which I don't suggest because it takes a lot of time. Please don't do that. Use the tests that are given you, but then, it's good to look ahead and then use that same type of language. Thank you. The next one is then transfer and generalizability. So then the standard for this would just be, this just means that your successful performance on the test will allow valid generalizations about achievements to be made. If the students do well on your test, you know what you taught well. If the students don't do well on your test, now obviously a lot of this does depend on the student too. Are they lazy? Did they study? Did they put in the effort? But if they did put in the effort and they missed a huge section, this could also reflect your teaching ability. Presentations, scenarios, projects, portfolios, all of these can add dimension to the assessment that traditional testing might not be able to. So teachers can make valid generalizations about the achievement more easily when you use the type of authentic and performance type assessment. These generalizations may involve, instructional placement decisions, formative evaluation decisions, diagnostic decisions. When you make a well-constructed test, whether it's objective or performance or, essay type, you're allowing yourself to understand what you have to teach and how you have to teach next. Teachers are also then able to monitor their students' learning progress. The next one is then fairness. And this just means that the student performance will be measured in a way that does not give advantage to factors that are irrelevant from school learning. So not necessarily how neat their writing is, unless you told them beforehand. If your writing is not neat, I will take off points. You can say that to help them write neater. It's up to you, but you have to tell them ahead of time. So then your scoring schemes will then be similarly equitable. Now, this just means that there are a few basic rules for fairness. First of all, the test questions need to reflect, obviously, what you've taught in class. And then the expectations should be clearly known by your students. This means that each test item should present a clearly formulated task. One item should not help you answer another item. It should all be individually dependent of each other. And then you should give them enough time to complete the test. So if you are creating your own test, especially in the college and graduate level, I highly suggest you to take your own test at least once. So give yourself enough time to make it and then take it yourself to see if you can finish it in the time that you give the students. If you're making a test that's too long and the students aren't able to finish it, maybe it shouldn't be that long and you should reflect on that. Then of course, assign your points before you give the test and try not to change it too much after the test. Grading constructively requires the teachers then also to provide feedback, which then also depends on you grading it quickly. Like I said before, I think Abeka gives you 3 days to grade each test before you have to return it to the students. Give yourself enough time to grade, but then also be diligent in grading. The feedback should be the following. You can write encouraging comments on it that convey respect to the students for what they've tried to accomplish. You can praise the students for what they've done. I think this is really important also for those of you grading papers. You should give constructive and specific feedback. And what I'm saying is, instead of just writing on the entire paper, this was wordy. Okay, wordy is very general. What does that mean? Instead of just saying, tighten up your writing, be more specific. What does that mean? There are certain words that they could have taken down. They could have, changed this phrasing in a certain way. I think you should be more specific, especially when you're grading that type of thing, so that the students can improve quicker. And then the last one is reliability, the last criterion for an objective test. This is the point. Basically, the answers to the test questions will be consistently trusted to represent what the students know. The whole point of testing is to encourage learning, not to encourage guessing. A good test is designed with items that are not easily guessed without proper studying. I think this is what Mrs. Marshall was mentioning before. It is possible to construct all types of questions which are not readily guessed, and so require the student to comprehend basic factual material before they take that test. Multiple choice questions often are widely scorned in the educational realm as being guessing questions because you're given 3 or 4 choices and you have to choose from one of them. I think true and false also gets a bad reputation for being, 50-50. They don't really have to study, which can be true, but the solution to this is then to design the multiple choice items so that students who know the subject get the correct answer and the students who don't know it won't get the correct answer, because your distractors are then designed in a well and fair way so that the students who don't know knowledge will not be able to guess the correct answer, and the students who do, it will aid them. But there are several rules that we can use for defeating guessing. Let's talk about some of them. So the rule of thumb then for students is always pick B. If you always pick B, you'll probably get most of them correct. Now, the way to defeat this is not necessarily to not use B, but to make sure that each answer is used in the same number of times in random order. So if you're someone who is more likely to always put B as the answer, just use B if you have 10 questions 2 times. Use A 2 times, use C 2 times, use Z 2 times, and then make sure that you use the same number of times in random order. The next one, never pick an answer which uses the word always or never in it. Sometimes some of the choices will be all of the above or all of these. It uses those universal terms. Then to defeat this strategy is very easy. Make sure that each answer that has those terms in it are correct about 1/5 of the time. So once in a while, it will be the correct answer. The next one, if there are 2 answers which express opposites, you pick one or the other and then ignore all the other ones. So sometimes when you're doing multiple choice, there's one correct answer and you try to do like an extreme for the one that's not it. That's a way for students to be able to guess what the correct answer is then, because they know that, oh, here are 2 extremes, it's probably one of these, I'm going to pick one of them. But then you kind of then just wasted your own time creating the other 2 distractors. So once again, be careful about this. Sometimes offer opposites when neither is correct. And then the next one, pick the scientific sounding answer. When you're making multiple choice, a lot of times the longest answer would then be the right answer because it's the one you spent the most time thinking about, I guess. The way to defeat that then would be use scientific sounding jargon in all the wrong answers too. So then they can't choose the one that's most scientific sounding. The last one for today, pick a word which you remember was related to the topic. So then the strategy would be choose all of your distractors or all of your choices from the same portion. When drawing up distractors, which are the wrong answers, use terminology from the same area of the text as the right answer. Should we take a break? Do we want to take a break or do we want to finish the section? Sure, let's take a break. I'll take a 5-minute break.
Okay, let's pray. Father, we are so grateful for today that we can continue to learn. May the Lord be with us. Bless our time. Bless our learning together. We pray, Father, the information will help us to be a better teacher. We pray all this in Jesus' name. Amen. Okay.
All right, this next section will then just be going over different types of questions and how we can construct them to be the most objective that they can be. The first one that we're going to be talking about is multiple choice. Why do we use multiple choice? Well, multiple choice is good for a variety of reasons. Number one, for application, synthesis, analysis, and also evaluation levels. Now, obviously, it can also test the knowledge level, but for the most part, multiple choice can also test these other higher levels of learning. The types of questions that it would then ask would be, here's the question, give me the right answer. Or here is a statement that has a blank and you need to fill in the blank. Or out of these choices, which one is the best answer? Now, multiple choice items have advantages in certain areas. The first one is that they are very effective at making sure the students know the right answer, or to testing to see if they know the right answer. It is versatile at all levels. There is minimum writing required for the student. Now, there's a lot of required by the teacher, but minimum writing required for the student. And then guessing is or can be reduced. And then it can also cover a broad range of content. So these are why we want to use multiple choice. But multiple choice does have a couple disadvantages that we're going to look at and then also want to try to minimize. So the first one is that it is difficult to construct a good multiple choice item, simply because it's difficult to come up with plausible distractors or alternative responses. When you're making a multiple choice question, you want to make sure that the distractors and the choices that you're using are reasonable and not just outrageous, because then obviously the students won't choose that one. You want to make ones that are actually going to be helpful for the students who know the subject, and then unhelpful for the students who don't know or haven't studied. Does that make sense? So, what are the parts of a multiple choice question item then? There are two parts. Number one, we call that question the STEM, and then the next part would be the responses or the alternatives. So STEM and then alternatives. And then under alternatives, we have the correct answer, and then we have what we call the distractors. So the distractors are the parts that the students, the incorrect answers. The ones that the students, if they studied, they know not to choose those. And if they didn't study, they might choose one of those. So when we're writing multiple choice questions, there are a couple rules that we want to follow. Number one, you want to state the STEM as a direct question rather than an incomplete statement. And this goes the same for when you're asking students questions in your class. When I'm questioning students in class, I want to ask questions as a direct question, not as an indirect question. So I'm going to say, Daniel, who made you? I'm not going to ask the class, does anyone know? And then I'm not going to ask it in a way that's not a direct question. I'm trying to think of an example. So, for example, the question would be, who made you? If I were to say it in an indirect way, I would say, God made me. That's right. That's the answer to that particular catechism. But you see, it confuses students because you're not actually asking it in a direct way. You're asking them to kind of supply the answer as your voice trails off. It's not a good way to ask questions. You want to ask it in a direct way. So on a quiz or a test, if I were to give you this question, alloys are ordinarily produced by, and you're supposed to fill in the blank. Not a good way to ask a question. Instead, how could I rephrase this to make it a direct question? Anyone?
What usually produces alloys?
Sure, or you could say this, how are alloys ordinarily produced? That's right. Use it or ask it in a direct question. So when possible, you want to state the STEM as a direct question. Studies have been done that show when you actually ask students in an indirect way, you are increasing their cognitive load. Because not only are they having to interpret the statement that you just gave them, but they also have to supply an answer. Whereas when you just ask the question, all they have to do is supply the answer, as opposed to interpreting your statement to see what you're trying to ask. Does that make sense? So when students are taking a test, we want to make it easy for them to take the test. We don't want to increase any stress that might be on them as they're taking this test. One way to do that is just to ask questions in a direct way. The next one, you want to present a definite, explicit, and singular question or problem in the STEM. So for example, if I were to say this, psychology what? If that's my question, that would not be a good question. In fact, it would be a bad question because there are many answers that could answer this question. It would be much better just to say, what is the science of mind and behavior called? And then the answer would be just one word. So the key is you want to make your STEM the long part and then your multiple choice part the short part. Don't ever try to flip the definition. If you're asking students to memorize a definition, the definition part should be the question, whereas the term itself should be the answer in a multiple choice. Now, obviously, if you really want them to regurgitate that definition, ask it in a short answer. Don't ask it in a multiple choice. The next one, you want to eliminate excessive verbiage or irrelevant information from the STEM. Like I said before, we want to make it easy for students to understand and take these tests. But when you use a lot of jargon, kind of like on your tax forms or any government-related document, you're making it difficult for them to understand, and we don't want that. We want to make it easy for them to understand, so we want to use clear words. If I were to give you this question, while ironing her formal, Jane burned her hand accidentally on the hot iron. This was due to a transfer of heat between, once again, same thing, you're not asking a direct question, you're asking an indirect question. It is much better to just say, which of the following ways of heat transfer explains why Jane's hand was burned after she touched a hot iron? Ask it in a direct way. The next one. Include in the STEM any word or words that might otherwise be repeated in each alternative. Let me show you an example. If I were to give you this one on a test, in national elections in the United States, the president is officially A, chosen by the people, B, chosen by the members of Congress, C, chosen by the House of Representatives, or D, chosen by the Electoral College.
D.
Yes, I wasn't going to ask you, but yes, it is D. There's a problem with this question, though. If you've noticed, in all of my answers, I've repeated certain words that I could have just added to my STEM. Does that make sense? Yes. When you do that, now the students have fewer words that they have to choose from and actually make it easier for them to understand what you're asking. So if I were to do it this way, in national elections in the United States, the president is officially chosen by A, the people, B, members of Congress, C, the House of Representatives, or D, the Electoral College. Now there are fewer things that they have to read. It's easier for them to make the right choice. So once again, just limiting the words that you use. If you can reduce wordiness, it is good to do so in all aspects, speaking, writing, etc., but also especially in making tests. The next one, use negative stems sparingly. Use negative stems sparingly. In grammar, you're often told not to use double negatives because then it changes the meaning, because two negatives makes a positive, that's right. So same thing with tests. We want to avoid using the negative. Now, sometimes it's not possible. Sometimes you have to use the negative. And when you do, though, make sure that you emphasize it. So for example, if I were to give you this one, which of the following is not cited as an accomplishment of the Kennedy administration? I'm asking a negative. Which one of these was not cited, as opposed to saying which one of these was cited? I'm asking you for a negative. If I really have to give this kind of question, I have to make sure that I either underline, bold, or capitalize, or italicize, or all of them, in fact, the negative word, which is the word not. Doing so, I would do it this way. Which of the following is not? And I make sure I emphasize the word not so that students aren't tricked. You don't want to trick your students on a test. You want them to know exactly how to answer your test. When you do it the first way, it is easily misread to be as if you're asking for a positive, when in fact you're not, you're asking for the opposite. So once again, just a small thing that can help your students as they take their tests. The next one is the most important. You want to make sure that all of your alternatives or your distractors are plausible. They have to be reasonable. And I think this was what we mentioned earlier. The function of the incorrect alternative is to serve as a distractor. So if you're not distracting the students from the correct answer, you're actually wasting your time making this multiple choice question. If I were to give you this example, who gathered the data that helped reveal the structure of DNA? A. Francis Crick, B. George Washington, C. James Watson, D. Rosalind Franklin, or E. Snoopy? Let me ask this question. Which one of these distractors, or multiple of them, are wasted, basically?
D, C, D.
Yeah, D, Snoopy, or E, Snoopy, sorry, and then also George Washington, right? B, there's no reason for you to add those two. You kind of just made it more difficult for yourself. You wasted space on the test. You wasted the time that it took the students to read those answers. Really just unnecessary. You want to make sure that the distractors you use are actually reasonable. Now, if you wanted to know the answer, it's actually D, Rosalind Franklin. But the other ones were also on her team, so I could see why you were confused by that. But make sure that your distractors are actually functioning. Then the next one, make the alternatives mutually exclusive. When I say this, I mean don't trick your students. Don't include answers that overlap. There should only be one correct answer, unless one of your choices was both A and B, something like that. But you really want to limit that. So for example, if I were to give you this one, a daily minimum required amount of milk that a 10-year-old child should drink is A, 1 to 2, B, 2 to 3, C, 3 to 4, or D, at least 4. You can see that the answers overlap. And you don't want this because it's not a good situation. Instead, you should just make it, 1, 2, 3, or 4 glasses. And just limit it that way. The next one, make the alternatives approximately equal in length. Does anyone know the answer? I mean, why? Why should we make all the responses the same length? Yes?
Because the longer answer is usually the right answer.
Correct, because then it gives clues to what the answer could be. If only one of your answers is really long, all the other ones are short, the students are most likely going to ask or choose the really long answer because that's most likely the correct answer. So you want to make them all parallel. You want to make them all almost the same length so that it seems like all of them could be correct. If I were to give you this example, the right answers in multiple choice questions tend to be, obviously you're going to choose A, right? This is the longer and more descriptive one. So once again, this is a common error. You really want to just make sure that they're all the same. Some final tips about writing multiple choice though. The research is not clear about how many distractors you should have. Most of the time, they will say choose either 3 or 4 answers though. 3 to 4 answers, or I should say responses, is about the amount that you want to have, or the number that you want to have. Some people will argue and say that 4 choices is the best, but sometimes it's hard to come up with extra distractors. And so when you can't plausibly think of a good distractor, 3 choices is fine. So 3 to 4 is the number that you should go for. You want to make sure that you randomly distribute the correct answer. So like I said before, it's not always B, it's not always C, not always D. If you can, evenly space them out, or evenly, I should say, distribute them. You have 5 A's, 5 B's, 5 C's, and 5 D's, not in that order. And then of course, you want to make sure that you avoid clues that connect the stem and the answer. And this could be grammatical structure, whether your grammar is there. For example, the blank is right behind a plural verb. So then they know that they have to choose a plural word or something because it grammatically follows that way. You want to avoid those clues. Sometimes a logical one or a verbal one. You want to avoid those associations. Don't give them the clue to the answer in your stem. Yes?
Another example that would be like and instead of a. It's very telling.
Yes. So for example, if I say A cat, egg, or elephant?
Cats.
Yeah, you would choose cat because a cat. You wouldn't say a elephant. So kind of like that. That would be an example of that. Yes, thank you. And then of course, you want to present alternatives in a logical order. And I think this goes for a lot of things. When you're listing anything out, it should always be presented in some kind of order, whether it's alphabetical, so that's the easiest. If you have no logical order, choose alphabetical order. And then that also randomly distributes your answers, because it's not always going to be A, it's not always going to be B. You're following alphabetical order. You could also do chronological order from most to least, etc. But follow some kind of order when you're arranging your distractors. And then of course you want to have a similar formatted alternative, like I said before. They're either all phrases, all words, or all sentences, but they're all usually the same length. You're going to use misconceptions students have indicated in class for your distractors. So when you're asking questions in class, and students often get or answer this question incorrectly by supplying this answer, use that answer as a distractor, because then it tests who actually really knows the correct answer. And then of course, a way to judge a good STEM is just students who know the content should be able to answer before reading the alternatives. So if you have, how do you know if you have a good STEM? Number one is a direct question. And then number two, do you know the answer before they've read all of the alternatives? And that's a good way to know if you've made a good STEM. Quickly moving on, let's go to matching. Matching is good for knowledge and comprehension. And there are different types that they can test for. You can test terms with definitions. You can test phrases with other phrases. You can test for cause and effect, parts with a larger unit, or even problems with solutions. What are the advantages of matching? A couple of them. Number one, you can cover a lot of content with matching. It's a small section, but you cover an entire unit. So matching is good for that. But not only that, it's valuable in content with many facts. If there are many things that you want students to remember, use a matching section, because then you cover a lot of content that way. Unfortunately, it does have a disadvantage because you can't really test for higher level thinking. So usually for matching, you're only testing knowledge. You're not necessarily testing comprehension, analysis, evaluation, etc. It's really just the lower level. Now there are two parts to it. There are two columns. So the question and then the answers. Once again, we call these the stems and then the responses. And usually for the responses, we number it with capital letters. So the question would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then the responses would be A, B, C, D, E, etc. So we want to use capital letters. Even for matching, a lot of studies show that you should use capital letters, just because when you use lowercase letters, some students will write it in a way that might confuse, like an A with a D, or another letter with a T with an F, something. So they do say try to use capital letters. I think Abeka still just uses lowercase, which is fine. Just have them print clearly. Let's talk about some things about matching though. The first rule is that you want to include directions that clearly state the basis for matching the stimuli with the responses, instead of just giving your instructions as match. That's not clear enough. Instead, you should say match the authors with their works. Make sure that it's clear what you want them to match. So a bad direction would be match the following. Instead, a better one would be something like this. On the line to the left, identify the location and characteristics in column 1 and write the letter in column 2 that is best defined. Sometimes you might even want to say each letter can only be used once, or each letter can be used more than once, etc. And so once again, those things need to be clearly indicated. The next rule, you want to use only items that share the same foundation of information. Kind of like in your distractors for your multiple choice. You want to take answers from just the same unit or same part of the textbook. You don't want to match different contents, if that makes sense. So if I were to give you this example, what do you think does not belong?
First year of first nuclear fusion.
The years, right? The years, and also sometimes the names.
Formulas.
The name and the years do not belong here. If you're testing formulas, just test formulas. If you're testing years, test years in a different section. It could be matching 2 or matching 3. You can create multiple matching sections, but don't put them all in the same section. The next rule, the column of stimuli on the left should set the question clearly. So for example, if I were to give you this one, the directions, obviously there's something wrong with the directions already, but it says match the following. Do you even know what you're matching? I mean, you have the question city dwellers, hunter-gatherers, pastoral nomads, and then it gives you, the responses are also strange. Some of them are buildings, some of them are animals. You want to make sure that the question side, the 1, 2, and 3, clearly indicates what you're trying to match. So something better would be this. On the left of each definition, write the letter. The directions are already clearer. And then if you notice my questions or my STEM, it says which one of these, A, B, C, D, I didn't have space to put the A, B, C, D, but A, B, C, D, which one of these lives in areas of high population density? And all of them are asking for basically the same type of content. The next one. You want to make sure that you have brief matching items. So 10 to 15 questions would be a maximum. Anything longer than that, I think you're requiring too much of your students. So keep your matching questions limited to between 10 to 15. You want to use short phrases in response lists. So this means that your stems should be longer, and then your responses should be shorter. Once again, use chronological or alphabetical order. Have some type of order to order all of your responses. In this way, you don't have to kind of make sure that the answers aren't matching up with the questions because you have an order there. You want to avoid multiple correct responses for one STEM, although if you do require this, make sure you put it in your instructions. And then of course you want to avoid breaking stems across pages. And this goes for any type of question. You don't want to break that section up into two different pages. You might have to move some of your questions around to make sure that they all fall on the same page. One last section and then we'll end. Let's talk about fill in the blank. Fill in the blank is good for knowledge. Unfortunately, it doesn't really test higher level if you're requiring for only short answers. The advantages are that it minimizes guessing because students can't necessarily guess the correct answer. They have to know their answer. You encourage more intensive study this way. You require them to actually know the answer. And then, of course, it provides an objective measure of what students actually know. The disadvantage, though, is that these cannot test higher levels, unfortunately. It is sometimes difficult to construct to only have one correct answer because sometimes there are multiple correct answers to the blanks that you ask them to fill. And so, like I said before, sometimes there may be more than one correct answer, which is why it makes it difficult to construct. Let's talk about some rules then for fill in the blank. First of all, you want to make sure that you omit only significant words from the statement. So for example, if I were to ask you this first one, every atom has a central blank called a nucleus. Does anyone know? If you don't, I won't, I don't blame you. I didn't know either. It's hard to know what I'm asking for because a lot of things could fill this blank.
Structure.
Is actually core. Every atom has a central core called a nucleus. And now I'm actually testing for the right thing. Another rule is do not omit so many words from the statement so that the intended meaning is then lost. And so if I were to give you this example, the blank word to Egypt as the blank word to Persia. Well, a lot of things could fill this, right? It would be better if I were to say this. The pharaohs were to Egypt as the blanks were to Persia. Sure, I don't know the answer, sorry. The next one, avoid obvious clues to the correct response. Once again, we're just repeating the same thing we mentioned before. If I were to give you this question, most of the United States libraries are organized according to the blank decimal system. Well, you already know the answer. There are only two types of ways to categorize libraries, and one of them is, well, what's this one? Does anyone know? Yes, the Dewey Decimal System. I basically gave you the answer because I said the word decimal. Instead, it would be better if I asked this: which organizational system is used by most United States libraries? And now it's harder to guess. Dewey Decimal System. The next one, be sure there's only one correct response, which was, like I said before, it's why this type of question is a little harder to construct, because you have to make sure there's only really, truly one correct answer. If I were to give you this question, trees which shed their leaves annually are?
The trees that
Deciduous.
Yes, you're right. The answer is deciduous, but many things could fill this blank. Trees which shed their trees annually are tall, are green, I don't know. There are many things that could fill this blank. It's not constructed well. So instead, I should say this: trees which shed their leaves annually are called, a much better term. The next one, you want to avoid grammatical errors. Grammatical clues that will give you the correct response. And Stacy gave us an example of this. So for example, this one, a subatomic particle with a negative electron charge or electric charge is called an
neutron.
So there are three. It's either electron, proton, or neutron. And you already know which one it is because I used the word N. Right, it's the electron, that's right. So much better would be if I said something like this: a subatomic particle with a negative electric charge is called A or N, and then it's harder to guess because you don't know, oh, it has to be a vowel. Does that make sense? So once again, grammatical clues. Another rule, put the blank at the end of the statement rather than at the beginning. So if I were to give you this question, blank is the measure of central tendency that is most affected by extremely high or low scores. This is a math question, by the way. It's much better if I were to ask it this way. The measure of central tendency that is most affected by extremely high or low scores is the blank. Always put your blanks towards the end if you can, because then it's easier for students to read the question and then give you an answer. The answer to this is arithmetic mean. Not that you had to know that. Just some final thoughts then that I wanted to talk about as we end. A couple of things. Number one, return your tests, your assessments promptly. And that depends on what the assessment or assignment is. For quizzes, you can check in class if you want. For tests, 3 days. For projects, maybe a week or 2. But set a limit for yourself and return them in a timely manner, because it is important for students to receive that feedback. That feedback is a part of the education that they're getting. And if you lose that feedback part, they're not learning in the best way that they can. Number 2, when the exams are returned, to show respect to the students, I always try to fold the exam. So if I'm passing back exams, I don't just, layer them. I fold them up and then hand them to the student so that they don't have to be ashamed of their grade in front of their peers. But once again, just showing that respect to students. And then finally, you want to make sure that you give feedback to the class as a whole. So do go over the answers when time allows. Sometimes you may not have time, but do try to take a couple minutes out to answer all the questions that students have and make sure that you do that with them. Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you so much. And our time is almost running out, so let me show you some more thing, and then we'll be able to move forward. And of course, we need to go to the restaurant. We have the van to go there, and so if you don't have time, if you don't have oh my, it's not working anymore. Okay, yeah. Okay, let me show you what we're going to get. We're going to give everybody a gift. So I want to show you what kind of gift that we're going to have. So this is the gift that you're going to have. And but I know that the different people have different sides, so we would like you to have one certificate. This is a gift certificate that you can go to Jianfang to take the size that fit you, okay? Otherwise, if we give you and too small, and you looks not nice. So I asked Jenny to pass along, and everybody will have one. For those attending the seminar, this is your award, and we definitely are very grateful you're here. And that's the reason why we want to definitely thank you for joining us, and hopefully this will be a good time to enjoy the gift and also for some good learning. Now, I also want to finish up with this conclusion, and so let me have a few more minutes of your time so we can start finish up for the conclusion here. Now, this time is assessment. We already mentioned, so now it's 12 o'clock. I'll finish up as soon as possible. There's a few practical application of the assessments and feedback strategy for improving learning. And there's a lot of that we can talk about, but I just want to share 5 of the important concepts here. Number 1, formative assessments for ongoing feedback, which means that you need to.
It's recording your words.
Oh my! How about that? That's very nice.
Your laptop though. Your laptop though.
How? Okay. Subtitle. Okay then. Now the first one is formative assessments for ongoing feedback. This is important because you want to continue with this kind of formative assessments. Number 2 is actionable and specific feedback. You want to have this kind of a feedback that come back to you, so you'll be able to immediately change your teaching and improve the learning. Number 3 is self-assessment and reflection. Now, so you also want your students to have this this kind of a method to help them to assess themselves. And this is a part of teaching the students how to study. And sometimes we just teach them and then let them go back and we did not actually teach them or guide them to how to prepare themselves for the assessment. So they need to have a self-assessment first, and then they can reflect what they actually learn. So the self-assessment is also important. Number 4, besides self-assessment, but we also need to have a peer assessment for collaborated learning, so that they will gather together and test each other. Okay, so this is also part of teaching your students how to study. I mean, again, teacher, it is not end your classroom or teaching when you finish teaching them in the classroom. You also need to help them, to give them some tools and methods, so they go home when they prepare their homeworks or prepare their tests or quiz, they'll be able to know how to do it. So number 3, and number 4 are good methods or tools to help your students to study. And number 5, timely and continuous feedback loops. There's a circle there, and you want to continue to do the feedback, and then assessment, feedback, so that they can continue to learn. And that's important for us in this conclusion. We already heard what to make a test, assessments, and quiz, and multiple choice, and truth and false. But how to apply into our teaching, that is very important and practical. So let me give you a very quick concept here. The formative assessment for ongoing feedback, the objective is to use formative assessment like quizzes, peer review, and class discussion to provide continual feedback. So that the concept is that you want the feedback to come to you, so you know that how each students that they improve, and how each students contain the knowledge, or accept the knowledge, or do understand or comprehend the teachings you already teach. So it's very important that you give them quiz, or not even formal quiz. You can just ask questions and during the teaching, and then ask them to feedback. Okay, so that's a continual formative assessment. Application: implement low-stakes quizzes or quick in-class poll to gauge students' understanding and adjust instruction accordingly. When you finish a portion of the teaching and then find out that the student did not get it, well, don't continue, because I mean the purpose is for the students to know. Now, if they don't know, then hey, you need to come back and to use other ways to review or to teach again. Now, sometimes people, a lot of people, question me, says, "Well, hey, I mean your sermon is so repeating yourself, and keep on repeating yourself." But we already heard that. Well, my fear is that when I continue my teaching, and the problem is that they forgot what's happening last week. So usually I would like to kind of a little bit review from a different angle, and adding up some of the illustration, so that they will remember what they have been taught. I mean, yes, I repeat myself a lot, but I as a teacher, I have to repeat myself, so that my students or my people will be able to collect the information. Now, I don't care people criticize me be repeating so much, because as a parent, as a teachers, my fear is that I teach a lot, and I feel so good with myself. I mean, self-esteem. But then the result is that none of us, our people or students, understand what I'm saying, right? Now, the story talking about John Wesley's mom, Susan Wesley, and then one time that her husband asked him, "Why you talk to your children, I mean, repeatedly so many times?" And Suzanne Wesley says, I have to repeat so many times because I'm afraid that my children, 19 of them, will miss what my instruction. So repeating is not wrong. Even some people think that's wrong. But don't listen to them because you need to guarantee your students understand what you have taught. Okay? Now, if they sick and tired about your repeating, that's their problem, not your problem, because you want to guarantee that they understand what's instruction, what you have taught, and then make sure that they collect all the information. If they all feel sick and tired, then you know they already got the information. Well, move on. Okay, so don't hear those criticized, and then you stop repeating yourself, and then guess what? Your students suffer. They miss that part. So it's not wrong as a teacher to repeat. And sometimes repeating is the key to gain the knowledge and the understanding comprehension. Okay, so that's the reason why sometimes people think that the mom and the teacher are so nagging. Why? Because we want to make sure that kids understand what they have learned. And then benefit help students and identify areas of improvements and foster a growth mindset. So this is the part you want to continue and progressively ongoing to understand whether they catch up the knowledge or not. Some teachers don't repeat. That is actually not right. Okay, repeat, but not. Of course, I mean you don't want to repeat because you didn't prepare. Okay, you want to repeat because you want to make sure that the student get the information. Some teachers definitely because their lack of preparation, so they keep on repeating themselves. But that's not what we want to do. We want to help the students to understand. Secondly, actionable and the specific feedback. The objective is that provide feedback that is clear, specific, and actionable. Now, Dr. Krishna already mentioned about clear, specific, but then actionable is also another important. You want to not only measurable but actionable so that your students can do it. Now, if your students doesn't know how to do it and they don't have a clue how to act accordingly, then your teaching is invalid. You want them to follow and then be able to act on themselves. Then you will be able to be a successful teacher. So application, instead of a genetic comments, general comments, and off detailed guidance on what students did well and where they need to improve with suggestion for the next step. For example, I asked students to memorize a Bible verse, but then they did memorize, but the spelling is totally wrong. I mean, yes, the first letters and the last letters correct, but the mess up in the middle. Well, then that means this is the part that they need to repeat. So what should I do? I will ask them to do some actionable practice. So I will ask them to prepare a paper and then write 3 times exactly. Then cover the verse and write again. And then if after they cover and then trying to compare with the verse and find out there's a different wrong, then write 3 times again and then cover the verse and write again. So that's very actionable. You tell them what to do. And that's the way that they will be able to understand. Or you can say, okay, this is a verse with 20 words, but you break down with different phrase and memorize phrase by phrase. And then write 3 times the first 2 phrases and then write 3 times the last 2 phrases, and now combine them together and write 3 times. And so you give them actionable method, so they will be able to do it at home. Okay, so teach them, suggest them what to do. Benefit: enhance students' motivation and understanding, leading to better learning outcomes. I have students doesn't know how to memorize the Bible verse, and I asked him to do that several times and come back and then find out that he memorized all the words but missed the punctuation. Guess what happened? Now go back and read it again and try it again and memorize and copy first, then memorize, and then copy first, memorize until that he can do 100% correct. Then come back to do the test or to do the quiz. And that's the way you teach your student how to study. Give them actionable and specific feedback. So you, as a teacher, just not teach them all the knowledge and say, okay, go back. Whether you know or not how to memorize, then that's not my job. Then we fail, because we still did not help them to memorize the Bible verse or memorize the knowledge, and give them the way that they know they can study. And so that's actionable feedback. And then number 3, self-assessments and reflection. I just mentioned to you that they need to do it themselves and try copy 3 times, then self-exam and self-assessment, so that after the copy, then they need to assess themselves and to see whether their answer is exactly related to the correct answer. Okay, so self-assessment and reflection. Objective is to encourage students to assess their own work and reflect on their learning process. So after they copy 3 times and then cover all the Bible verse, and they will memorize themselves without copy, and to check whether they are 100% perfect. Now, if not, then copy 3 times again and try to self-exam again. So a couple of times they will be able to memorize those difficult things. See, there's 2 kinds of a memorization. Number 1 is general memorization, which means you just remember certain kind of information and generally, not precisely. But there's a second memorization called verbatim memorization, which means that the word by words, like the Bible verse or even drama and sometimes music, word by word, note by note. And so you need to teach the students how to memorize, and that's a part of our teacher's job. And so when they know how to memorize and they have this tool to memorize, then the student's grade is going to improve. A lot of times students doesn't know how to study because they look at there, the words knows them, they knows the word, but when they go to the test, they know nothing. The words don't know them, they don't know the words. That's how it happened. And you can see a lot of students sitting in sitting in the desk and reading the books the whole day. And yet when they go to test, well, they get 0. Why? It doesn't mean that they didn't spend the time. They just don't know how to study. Now, memorization is a process of training. Without training them how to memorize, we cannot help them to collect the data. Without the data in their brain, they don't learn anything. And so memorization is really the fundamental part of the learning. And without knowing how to memorize, then listen, the students are not going to grow. And they are not lazy. They just doesn't know how to do it. And so teacher, you need to guide them so they will be able to know how to do it. Integrate self-assessments, checklists, and reflex journals into the curriculum, allowing students to evaluate their process. The benefit promotes self-regulation and deeper learning as students become more aware of their strengths and area for growth. Now, when they know how to memorize, guess what happens? It will trigger the interest of to dig more knowledge. And once they know how to memorize with this kind of skill, then soon that they are going to learn more. And self-assessments also, including how to assess themselves. So after they memorize, then you need to ask them to test themselves, cover all the Bibles and verse, and then come up with a piece of paper and give themselves a time clock and push the time clock and then start writing. Now, when they start writing, then that gives them an urgency that they need to finish on time. This will help them to increase the memories faster, okay? Because you cannot think, when you go to the test, you cannot think. You have to have the intuition or instinct immediately write down the answer. That's part of training. So you need to train your students and help your students train themselves to test themselves on the time clock. And so when they can finish a verse within 3 minutes, then they pretty much will be able to take the test. But if they cannot finish within a limited time, that means they are not memorized the verse by heart. Okay, so they need to train again, do it again until they can finish within a short time. Now, when I was in the seminary, my professor gave us a bunch of articles to read and give us an answer and questions. So we need to find the answer and make it important outline ourselves, and then memorize the outline, and then finish up within 3 minutes. You know, when we try and write the answer, and when we finish within 3 minutes, our hands just shaking. But we have to memorize all this. And because my professor is strict professor. And when the time's up, and he will collect all the paper. But yet that trained us to memorize everything, first of all, analysis of everything, and make an outline and combine all the idea, and then memorize all the answer from ourselves, not to copy from the articles. We have to form an outline for ourselves. So this involves all the principle that Krishna just mentioned. And then we go to the test. We need to finish on the specific time the professor gave. And guess what? We have to practice it, train ourselves until that we're perfect. So we go to the test, and we saw the questions immediately. We form, remember what we form and the outline. So we need to write and without any stop. I mean, we need to finish on time and turn in the paper on time. Now that's part of training, so you need to teach your students, and to do that, then once they develop this kind of a skill, guess what happened? It will increase his self-confidence, and they are not going to be afraid of tests or quiz or whatever. They already they can prepare well to go to face the test. So self-assessment is a very important part of the learning process. Without the students to involve into this self-assessment, I mean, we will not success in teaching. So very important. Now, peer assessment is also extend from self-assessment, because now you have some like-minded students and then work together and to encourage each other, so that sometimes the peer pressure is so strong that if you group the students, good students together, they will all improve. But if you group students, I mean, they don't study, they will all draw them. And so it's very important you get the peer assessment. Collaborative learning. So objective is use peer assessment to force collaborative learning and creative critical thinking. And application is organized, structured peer review sessions where students give the received feedback on each other's work. So team up with them, 2 or 3. The best is really 2, okay? 2 in one group. And so they can help each other. And for example, the students already gave a self-assessment and come to the peer time, and then the A students will test the B student. And once the B student finished, the A student graded, and then now turn to the B students will test the A students, and so on and so forth, and they will test each other to prepare to have the quiz or big test. So when they have self-assessment and then peer assessment, guess what happened? I mean, they already learned this material so familiar. When they go to the teacher's test or quiz, I mean, piece of cake. They're already familiar with those kind of information. And so when they take the test, it's much easier, and they will have more confidence to learn the subject. So benefit is develops communication skill. So, I mean, you have the group learning, expose students to diverse perspectives, and reinforce learning. So you help each other to learn, and all the classroom will grow together. Finally, timely and continuous feedback loops. This is a circle. Don't let the circle break. You keep on doing that, so until the students continue to improve. So objective is provide timely feedback to maintain students' engagement and motivation. So that's the reason why you need to kind of evaluate the task or quiz as soon as possible. And so the students will be able to understand, oh, yeah, I missed this point, I missed that point, and that will help them to correct immediately. Applications, set up regular feedback cycle. So you need to design this cycle in your curriculum, and where students receive feedback shortly after assessments, with the opportunity to revisions and improvement. See, that's a very important key. And finally, the benefits help students stay on track and reduce anxiety by providing ongoing support and opportunity for improvement. So the timely support and timely assessment and feedback, this will really help them, and so that they will continue to grow. And this is very important. And hopefully you can implement into your teaching and help the students to have a great improvement. Okay, now 12:30, a little bit over. Okay, well, let's finish up with a prayer, and then we will be able to get on the bus, and we can go to the restaurant, enjoy the lunch. Now, we already called them, and so we're going to have a lunch buffet, so let's pray first. Father, we are so grateful for this time that we can gather together. Thank thee, Father, for giving us a time that we will be able to learn how to implement some of the important principles, so that we'll be able to help our students to grow and they will have the right kind of assessments and feedback in order to continue to improve the areas that they need to improve, and then to reinforce the good area that they already know, and so that they will continue to grow in the Lord. Thank you, Father, for this time, and thank you for our people to gather together. May the Lord bless us and be with us. We pray all this in Jesus' name. Amen. Okay, well, let's get ready to go to the restaurant, and we can come back to clean up here. And we have a van there, so everybody, if you don't have a card, then you can